The auditorium was packed. I stood at the back with my hands folded, watching Thomas Reddin walk across the stage like he owned the world. The spotlight hit his face perfectly as he grinned at the crowd. He was accepting the Leadership Excellence Award, the promotion everyone had been talking about for weeks. The applause was thundering. People stood up. His wife clapped from the front row. I felt something tighten in my chest, but I didn't look away. I had been waiting for this moment. I reached behind my blazer and felt the envelope there, sealed and heavy with weight that nobody else could see. The audit results. Everything I had been working toward. Everything that was about to change. Thomas tapped the microphone, and the room quieted down. He started his speech, thanking people, mentioning his vision for the company, talking about growth and trust. Then he paused. He looked directly at the section where I was standing. He smiled that smug smile I had learned to hate. "Even Elena has learned from her mistakes," he said. The words hung in the air like poison. Some people looked around to see where I was. My fingers tightened around the envelope. This was it. This was the moment everything would come into the light. My name is Elena Ward, and I am 32 years old. I work as a financial analyst at Morrison Industries, a mid-sized company that handles millions of dollars in transactions every single year. I don't like talking about myself much. I'm the kind of person who prefers accuracy over attention, numbers over gossip, and quiet mornings over loud celebrations. My life before all of this was simple and organized. I woke up at 6 in the morning. I went to work. I checked spreadsheets for errors. I came home, made dinner, and sometimes had weekend dinners with my sister Margot. That was my life. I was good at what I did. Caught mistakes. Found patterns. I saw things that didn't add up. My desk was clean. My files were organized. My reputation was solid. People knew they could trust me with the details, with the money, with the truth. At least that's what I thought. Thomas Reddin was the director of operations. He was handsome in a way that made people trust him without thinking. He wore expensive suits. He smiled a lot. He was friends with the executives. Everyone loved him. He told jokes in meetings. He remembered people's birthdays. I had worked with him for 3 years before everything fell apart. I thought he was a good person. I was so wrong. It started on a Tuesday morning in March. I was at my desk, drinking coffee and reviewing quarterly reports, when I got an email that made my stomach drop. HR wanted to see me immediately. No explanation. No context. Just a request to come to the 3rd floor right away. I saved my work, closed my laptop, and walked toward the elevators. My hands felt cold. I didn't know what I had done wrong. I had submitted all my reports on time. I had caught 3 accounting errors last month that could have cost the company thousands. I tried to think of anything I might have missed, but I couldn't come up with anything. The HR office was quiet. 2 people sat behind a large desk, and they looked uncomfortable. They didn't smile when I walked in. One of them slid papers across the table toward me. I picked them up with shaking hands. My eyes moved across the words, but they didn't make sense at first. Unapproved withdrawals. $38,400. Linked to my login. My badge number. My authorization codes. All of it traced back to me. I felt the room start to spin. "There must be a mistake," I said. My voice sounded small and far away. "We don't think so," the HR director said quietly. She wouldn't look at me. They called me into a conference room. Thomas was already there, standing by the window with his arms folded across his chest. When I walked in, he turned and gave me a look of pure disappointment. It was an act. I understand that now. But in that moment I believed it. He shook his head slowly, like he was sad about something. "I don't understand how this happened," he said, walking toward me. "I trusted you, Elena. We all did." He placed a hand on my shoulder. To anyone watching, it looked like he was being kind. It looked like he was comforting me. But his grip was tight. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "I'm sure there's an explanation," he continued. "But we have to follow protocol. The audit trail leads to your codes, your login, your authorization." He looked at me like he was disappointed I would do something like this. Like I had betrayed his trust personally. The HR director cleared her throat. "We're going to need to suspend you while we investigate," she said. "Effective immediately. You'll receive partial pay, but you won't have access to company systems. Your badge is being deactivated." I wanted to argue. I wanted to scream that I didn't do this. But the weight of the papers in my hands, the evidence with my name on it, kept me silent. They walked me out. In front of everyone. The next 3 days were the longest of my life. I went home. I sat on my couch. I didn't eat much. My sister called 3 times and I didn't answer. What would I even say? I'm suspended from work for stealing money I didn't steal? It sounded insane when I said it inside my head. I kept replaying conversations with Thomas, looking for clues, trying to understand when he decided to do this to me. I thought about all the times he had been kind to me, asking about my weekend, remembering that I liked tea without sugar, inviting me to lunch with the senior team. It had all been lies. All of it was just setting me up. On the 3rd day I did something different. I opened my laptop. I decided I wasn't going to sit and cry. I wasn't going to let this destroy me. I pulled up old files, internal memos, vendor lists, transaction records. Anything I could access from my personal account. I started looking for patterns. Real patterns. The kind of patterns that would explain what happened to that $38,000. I opened spreadsheets. Checked dates. I looked at vendor names. And then I saw something that didn't fit. A vendor name I had never approved in my entire career at Morrison Industries. The address linked to a P.O. box 2 towns away. Kept digging. Found more vendors. All of them fake. All of them with similar addresses. All of them with approval signatures that looked off. My fear started to transform into something else. Anger. Sharp, focused, quiet anger. I spent all night going through financial logs. My eyes burned from staring at the screen, but I couldn't stop. Every time I found another fake vendor, another approval signature that wasn't mine, another transaction that didn't make sense, I felt stronger. The anger sharpened into clarity. This was about more than just me now. This was about the truth. I found something crucial around 4 in the morning. A vendor name, North Star Solutions. The address matched a P.O. box. The approval signature was forged. But here's what mattered. The signature looked like mine, but it wasn't. The loops were different. The pressure was different. I had been writing my signature the same way for 12 years. I knew exactly how it looked. This wasn't me. I printed everything out. I made notes in the margins. I created a timeline of when the transactions occurred. Then I did something bold. I scheduled an appointment with an independent auditing firm called Precision Financial Review. They were expensive. I paid for it myself using my savings. I couldn't trust the company's internal auditors. They worked for Morrison Industries. They worked for people who had already decided I was guilty. An independent firm wouldn't have that bias. They would find the truth. When I called to schedule the audit, I told them I needed it done quickly and quietly. I explained the basic situation. They agreed to review everything I could provide from the past year. The woman on the phone said, "We'll get to the bottom of this, Ms. Ward." Something in her voice made me believe her. I returned to work after my suspension ended. The company had decided to let me come back while the internal investigation continued, but everything was different now. People looked at me differently. They would stop talking when I walked past their desks. The break room fell silent when I entered. I wasn't contagious with success anymore. I was contagious with scandal. Kept my head down. I did my work. I didn't talk to anyone about what happened. On my second day back, Thomas walked by my desk. He stopped and tapped it lightly with his knuckles. I looked up. He was wearing his expensive smile. "Good to have you back," he said. "For now." Those 2 words hung in the air between us. He wanted me to know that he had the power here. He wanted me to know that I was on borrowed time. I didn't respond. I just looked back at my screen. But inside, I knew something he didn't. His clock had started ticking. I had already sent everything to the independent auditors. They were digging through the financial records right now. They would find the truth. They would find his signature, his approval codes, his login. I just had to be patient. I had to wait for them to finish their work. The promotion announcement came the following week. An email went out to the entire company. Thomas Reddin would be receiving the Leadership Excellence Award at a ceremony on Friday evening. There would be executives attending. There would be his family. There would be photos and celebration and everything he wanted. He spent all week bragging about it. He told people at lunch. He updated his LinkedIn profile. He talked about his vision for the future of Morrison Industries. He acted like he had already won. I spent that same week checking my email every hour, waiting to hear from the auditors. I wanted them to finish before the ceremony. I wanted it to be done before he stood on that stage and accepted his award while wearing that smug smile. I thought about going to HR before the ceremony. I thought about telling them what I had found. But I knew it wouldn't work. They had already decided I was guilty. Thomas had convinced them. They had already suspended me based on the evidence he planted. If I walked in with my own investigation, they would say I was desperate. They would say I was trying to save myself. They would say I was the victim here, trying to become the villain. Well, I needed something official. I needed proof so clear and so undeniable that they couldn't ignore it. Friday morning arrived. I woke up early and chose my clothes carefully. Pressed blazer. Neutral makeup. Hair neat and professional. I wasn't dressing for Thomas. I was dressing for myself. I was dressing for what was about to happen. I felt a strange peace, like a storm that finally knows exactly where it's going to land. My phone buzzed at 10 o'clock. It was the auditing firm. My heart stopped. I stepped into my bathroom and closed the door before I called them back. A woman's voice came through. "Ms. Ward, we need to talk about what we found." I sat down on the edge of my bathtub. "Tell me," I said. "You were absolutely right," she said. "You didn't do this." I paused. "But this is much bigger than $38,000. Closed my eyes. "How much?" I asked. "We found 6 fake vendors," she said. "All using variations of legitimate company names. All routing funds to the same set of P.O. boxes. All approved with forged signatures. The total amount is over $320,000. My hands went numb. $320,000. Not $38,000. Who? I asked. Who approved these? That's the thing, she said. We have camera logs. We have timestamp records. Everything points to one person. Your director. Thomas Reddin. The auditing firm sent me the sealed results that afternoon. I held the envelope in my hands and felt its weight. It wasn't heavy because of the paper. It was heavy because of what it contained. Justice. The truth. Proof. I opened it carefully and read through the breakdown. They had documented everything. Timestamps showing when the transactions occurred. Camera logs proving that I wasn't at my workstation during those times. Forged signatures analyzed by a handwriting expert. Approval codes traced to Thomas's login. Rerouted funds following a clear pattern. Everything. They had found everything. There were notes about how the fraud had been going on for over 6 months. How Thomas had been systematically stealing money from the company and framing me for it. How careful he had been about covering his tracks, except for one thing. He had used me as his cover. He had used my login and my authorization codes because he knew I was trusted. He knew I was quiet and wouldn't fight back hard. He was wrong about that last part. The auditors had also included their professional opinion. Based on our thorough investigation, Ms. Elena Ward is completely exonerated of all charges. The evidence conclusively demonstrates that the fraudulent transactions were initiated, approved, and benefited from by Thomas Reddin, Director of Operations. We recommend immediate investigation by law enforcement and company leadership. The ceremony started at 6 o'clock. The auditorium was already filling with people when I arrived. Executives, HR staff, directors, Thomas's wife was there with his 2 kids. His parents sat in the front row. Nobody knew what was about to happen. I stood at the back in my pressed blazer with the envelope hidden behind it, tucked against my ribs. The ceremony proceeded like any other award event. The CEO gave a speech about excellence and leadership. People smiled. People took pictures. Thomas sat there looking confident and happy and completely unaware that his entire world was about to crumble. Then they called him to the stage. He stood up, shook hands with his family, and walked forward while everyone applauded. I felt my pulse slow down. This was it. This was the moment. Thomas took the microphone and started his speech. He thanked the company for believing in him. He talked about his vision for the future. He mentioned how he had worked hard and earned this recognition. He talked about trust and integrity. The irony was so thick I could barely breathe. He was talking about integrity while he had stolen over $300,000 from the company. He was talking about trust while he was framing an innocent person for his crimes. Then he paused. He looked over at where I was standing. His eyes found me in the back of the auditorium. He smiled that awful smile. Even Elena has learned from her mistakes, he said. Few people laughed. Some people turned to look at me. I felt hundreds of eyes shift in my direction. My heart was beating fast now, but I was calm. I stood up and started walking forward. The sound of my heels clicking on the floor echoed through the auditorium. People turned to watch me. Thomas's smile faltered. He wasn't expecting this. I walked down the aisle, step by step, closer and closer to the stage. Thomas started to speak again, trying to cover his confusion. Elena, this isn't the time for. But his words were getting jumbled. He was losing control of the narrative. I reached the stage and looked directly at the board of directors. I pulled the envelope from behind my blazer. I thought you might want to see the full financial audit of our department, I said. My voice was steady. My hands were steady. The CEO leaned forward, confused. What audit? He asked. I handed the envelope to him. The room was completely silent now. You could have heard a pin drop. Thomas's face was changing colors. He tried to laugh, but it came out wrong. This is ridiculous, he said. She's just trying to ruin my moment. She's desperate. She's obsessed with. But his voice cracked. People could hear the fear in it. The CEO opened the envelope and started reading. The CFO stood up and came over to look over his shoulder. Their faces changed as they read. The expressions shifted from confusion to concern to something darker. The board members started whispering to each other. Security guards quietly moved closer to the stage. I stood next to Thomas and watched his entire world collapse. His wife's face went pale. His children stopped smiling. His parents looked at each other in shock. The CEO looked up from the audit report and made eye contact with me. He looked back at Thomas and his jaw tightened. The CFO started pointing at specific pages, showing them to other board members. They were reading about the fake vendors, the forged signatures, the $320,000 in stolen funds. Thomas started sweating. He wiped his forehead with the back of his hand. He tried to speak, but nothing came out. The HR director closed her eyes like she was mortified. Every accusation they had placed on me, every meeting where they treated me like a criminal, every moment of shame and humiliation, it had all been built on his lies. I could see her realizing it. I could see her understanding what she had done, what they had all done. Thomas started moving toward me. She forged these, he said. His voice was getting louder, more desperate. She's framing me. She's making all of this up. But nobody believed him. His own wife lowered her camera. Executives started whispering among themselves. People were looking at me now with something different in their eyes. Not pity. Not judgment. Respect. The CEO stood up and walked toward Thomas. His voice was calm but sharp. Why are the approval signatures forged? He asked. Thomas didn't answer. The CFO stepped forward. Why were funds rerouted to these PO boxes? he demanded, showing Thomas pages from the audit. Thomas stammered, but the words wouldn't come. A compliance officer from the audience stood up. "Why do the camera logs show your access card when you weren't even scheduled to be in the building?" she asked. Thomas couldn't answer any of them. I could see him starting to panic. He started pointing at me again, getting louder, getting more desperate. "She's obsessed with me," he shouted. "She wants my job. She's framing me because she's jealous." But the more he talked, the more people stopped believing him. The less power his words had. His wife stood up and gathered the children. His parents looked at each other, confused and disappointed. He had lost the room completely. Security approached the stage. Thomas saw them and tried to back away. "This isn't happening," he said. "This isn't real. There's been a mistake. There's been a terrible mistake." But there wasn't a mistake. Everything was perfectly clear. The CO looked at him with disgust. "Thomas, please remove yourself from the stage," he said. "We need to review this immediately with our legal team." Thomas refused. He stood there, frozen, like if he didn't move, none of this would be real. Security took another step closer. They were professional about it, but their intentions were clear. He needed to leave. He was escorted away from the stage while he muttered incoherently about framing and conspiracy and betrayal. The audience watched in stunned silence as he was led out of the auditorium. I stood alone on the stage, holding the envelope, feeling nothing but calm. 2 days later, I was called into a private meeting with the board of directors. There were no lawyers this time. No HR representatives trying to look neutral. Just the CEO, the CFO, the compliance officer, and me. The CEO started by apologizing. He actually used the word apologize. "We made a serious error in judgment," he said. "We trusted the wrong person and didn't trust the right one." The CFO nodded. "The audit is absolutely clear," he said. "Thomas Reddin committed fraud and attempted to frame you for it. That's unforgivable." The compliance officer reached across the table. "I'm genuinely sorry for how we treated you," she said. I looked at each of them carefully. They meant it. They actually meant it. But meaning it didn't change what had happened to me. It didn't change the 3 days I spent crying on my couch. It didn't change the shame of being escorted out of the office. It didn't change the way people had looked at me. I took a breath before I spoke. "I appreciate the apology," I said. "But I need you to understand that you failed me. You didn't investigate properly. You didn't ask the right questions. You just believed him because he was charming and you wanted to believe him." The CEO listened without interrupting. When I finished, he nodded slowly. "You're right," he said. "We failed you and we want to make this right." He slid papers across the table. Full reinstatement. Back pay for all 3 weeks of my suspension. And something else. Promotion. Not just back to my old position. A promotion into a senior financial oversight role. They were offering me a position that would make me responsible for internal audits and financial controls across the entire company. The job that should have been preventing Thomas's fraud from happening in the first place. "We want you running this division," the CEO said. "Your work saved this company over $300,000. Your integrity is exactly what we need in leadership." I looked at the papers. Everything was there in black and white. Everything was real. I signed them slowly, carefully, making sure my signature was perfect. The real signature that only I could make. No one could forge it this time. Thomas was fired immediately. They stripped him of all pending bonuses and benefits. His fraud was exposed internally throughout the company. People learned what he had really done. The fake vendors. The stolen money. The forged signatures. The attempt to frame me. He tried to deny everything at first, but the evidence was too overwhelming. The auditors had documented everything perfectly. The camera logs didn't lie. The financial records didn't lie. The handwriting analysis didn't lie. He had nowhere to hide. I heard through the grapevine that he tried to blame me externally, tried to tell people I had framed him, but nobody believed him. He had burned every bridge. He had hurt too many people. His reputation went from golden boy to criminal in the span of 1 week. I didn't feel happy about his downfall. I didn't celebrate. I just felt relief. Relief that the truth had finally come out. Relief that I could stop living in fear. Relief that justice had actually worked. I moved into my new office. It was on the executive floor. It had windows overlooking the city. It was the same office Thomas had occupied just days before. I walked in and looked around at all his things still sitting there. His family photos, his awards, his expensive desk. I arranged for all of it to be removed. I wanted to start fresh. I ordered new furniture. A clean desk made of simple wood. A chair that was comfortable but not ostentatious. I wanted my space to reflect who I actually was, not who I was pretending to be. I hung a single piece of art on the wall. A photograph of the city at sunrise. Quiet. Beautiful. I sat in my chair on the first day and looked out the window. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt something deeper than that. Felt peace. I felt like the world had finally made sense again. I hadn't destroyed Thomas. He had destroyed himself. I had just brought the truth to the right room. My sister took me out to dinner to celebrate my promotion. She ordered champagne. She kept saying how proud she was of me. She kept talking about how I had been so smart to hire the independent auditors, so brave to walk into that ceremony with the truth. Not everyone would have done this, she said. Not everyone would have fought back. I listened to her, but I wasn't really thinking about the fight. I was thinking about the lesson I had learned. I was thinking about how people believe what they want to believe. How easy it is to frame someone if the person doing the framing is charming and trustworthy. How powerful the truth becomes when you finally bring it to light. How important it is to have evidence and documentation. How critical it is to find people who will actually listen to that evidence. I had done all of those things. Had been smart. Had been brave. But I had also just been honest. I had just chosen to find the truth instead of accepting the lie. The company hired new HR staff. They implemented new financial controls. They created new protocols for investigating accusations. They made it much harder for someone like Thomas to commit fraud ever again. They learned from what happened. The CEO made that announcement at the next all-hands meeting. He talked about what had occurred. He talked about the importance of proper investigation and due diligence. He talked about me by name, acknowledging my role in uncovering the fraud. People applauded. I sat there and listened, but I wasn't listening for the applause. I was listening to make sure they understood. I wanted every person in that company to understand that accusations need evidence. That innocent people need to be given a chance to defend themselves. That the truth is always more powerful than convenience. Months passed. I settled into my new role. I oversaw audits. I caught financial irregularities. I made sure that the company's money was being handled with integrity and care. I trained new employees on proper financial procedures. I taught them how to spot the warning signs of fraud. I taught them that accuracy matters more than convenience. I taught them that the truth is always the safest path, even when it's harder. I wasn't bitter about what Thomas had done. I had moved past that. But I was vigilant. I was careful. I understood now that people could be capable of terrible things when they felt cornered or desperate. I understood that everyone needed to be trusted but also verified. I understood that the systems and controls we put in place were the difference between justice and injustice. 1 year after the incident, I ran into Thomas at a grocery store. He didn't see me at first. He looked different. Smaller somehow. Like he had shrunk. He had aged years in 12 months. When he finally noticed me, his face went pale. He turned and walked quickly in the other direction. He didn't want to face me. He didn't want to acknowledge what had happened. I didn't follow him. I didn't say anything. I just watched him disappear down an aisle and then turn back to my shopping. Felt nothing. No anger. No satisfaction. No vindication. Just nothing. It was over. It was finished. He was a ghost of something that used to exist. I was something entirely new. I sat in my office on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, looking out at the city below. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and pink. I thought about the girl who walked into that auditorium with the envelope hidden behind her blazer. I thought about how scared she had been. How unsure she was that anyone would believe her. How fragile the truth had seemed in those early days when everyone assumed she was guilty. But the truth wasn't fragile. The truth was durable. The truth was powerful. The truth was always going to win in the end. Sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't destruction. Sometimes it's simply refusing to let someone rewrite your story. Sometimes it's just handing the truth to people who can see it clearly and letting the evidence speak for itself. I didn't need to do anything else. I didn't need to fight anymore. I didn't need to prove anything. The truth had already done all the work. The truth had already set me free.